WOCA.
WOCA.
All right, 5 minutes after 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. You know, in the aftermath of the Robin Williams story, there was no other organization that I wished could have been in the studio more than people from the Refuge. And I promise you, I'm not saying that because they are a client of ours or because they advertise with us, but because I know what they do out in Ocklawaha for folks who have depression and other issues. And I mean, they can tell you more about what they do than I could ever tell you. But I knew that they would be the people. And then Robin reminded me that we had a date with them today. So I didn't call them. In fact, I waited till today to talk about this. But can you imagine, I mean, how many of us were saddened when we heard that Robin Williams died? Period. We were sad. We didn't need to know anymore. He was gone. We were sad. Then when we heard he committed suicide, I tell you what I felt. I felt angry. I was mad at him. I said, how selfish of him. I don't know him. He's not my family. If I say I loved him, I don't know if I'm lying or not, because it's weird with celebrities. God forbid, I never want to know what this is like with somebody I love. Can you imagine the feelings, the emotions, the questioning, what could I have done? What could have been done prior to that? And that's why the Refuge would have been my first choice in asking for a guest to talk about that. And I didn't know that you were going to talk about Robin Williams today until just this morning. And Tom Pecca is who I'm talking to. He's in the studio. He's been with us before years ago. He and his mom. Are you the founders of the Refuge?
Judy's the founder, and
Judy's your mom.
I've been there from the beginning.
Okay, and you've had your issues too. Not that I'm getting personal, but
Sure.
we all have. Mm-hmm. We had a guest this morning. She was talking about deal with your mess because everybody has a mess. So it really is wonderful to know that we're all in the same boat. Maybe that's why we're here. Tom, your credentials written in pencil here. I guess we found out at the last minute you were coming. You're a therapist at the Refuge. You've been doing this for 11 years. You help people with trauma, with addiction. You've got a master's degree in counseling. You're registered as a mental health intern, certified addiction specialist, certified sex addiction therapist, certified trauma therapist, and a trainer. And you've trained therapists worldwide. You have, and I know you can't name them, but you have had well-known celebrities come to the Refuge. So anyway, thank you for coming in here to help us understand this. Suicide, how to understand depression, how to maybe help somebody ultimately.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I certainly know that the story of Robin Williams certainly impacted me, and harder than I believed it would. And for the Refuge and for myself, our hearts go out to his family in this difficult time. But
did you know him outside of celebrity? I mean, did you know him?
No, I've never met Robin Williams, but I can say that he impacted me greatly. His movies, you know, I use cinema a lot in what I do, and Robin Williams movies are some of the most impactful movies in my own life.
Right.
And when I use them for therapy, I was watching Dead Poets Society with a group of clients yesterday morning, just that piece about Carpe Diem, and when he whispers to the boys and he goes, we're food for worms, boys, seize the day. And it hit home so hard that he couldn't latch onto that himself in his last moments, and it's just so sad.
Yeah. And apparently he had some issues. Somebody said this morning that he had a sitcom that fell through. He was trying to redo all of that, and you know, we get older, and whatever happens to us, and sometimes I think it's we cast a better lot in life if we don't have success and we continually struggle for it, as opposed to having it suddenly and then trying to hold on to it.
Well, I mean, I think we have expectations that if you have celebrity or if you are successful, that somehow your life should be easier. And I don't know that that's true. I think it complicates life a bit more than it helps. And you know, I've worked with people in South Africa who have nothing, and I've worked with people who are some of the richest people in the world. And at the core, they both have problems. They both have issues. Sometimes money makes it harder. Sometimes money makes it harder to get well because you don't get to that desperation in the same way. You don't see the ability to change it in the same way. Sometimes when you don't have anything, you can have hope that if I get something, things will get better. But when you're at the top, there's nothing but going down. And Robin Williams I can only speak to what I do know about him, and certainly I have no inside information, and I never did work with the man.
Right.
But I do know his story.
You know people who have gone through similar things.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Robin Williams' story is he has a trauma history as well. He was bullied very severely in school.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, to the point where he isolated himself in his home, is what I read.
Oh, wow.
And the way that he got out of that is he started playing sports. He started wrestling, and he learned how to be funny. And the funny is what connected him to people. That was his defense mechanism.
Yeah.
That's the way that he connected. I do know he has a long history with substance abuse, and that he had been in and out of treatment several times.
Right.
I don't know when the last episode was, but there are rumors that it was recent, but I don't know that to be a fact. And I do know he struggled with depression from what he said himself. And in a 2009 interview, he talked about how he had never dealt with some of those core issues, which is what we do at the Refuge. So I can certainly see the things that might have led him to the place where he was.
And to deal with those core issues, a person, I feel, has to open up to somebody else. How do you get that person to open up to get the help?
It's really difficult because when especially someone who has a deep trauma history, if they have a history of sexual abuse, if they have a history of bullying, if they have a history of someone taking advantage of them, especially someone in a position of authority, it puts those of us who have that authority position in treatment in a hard place to gain trust. It takes time. It takes a lot of time. Some of us it's easier than others. Some of us just have that ability to give off a feel of safety. I've been told I have that. I don't know if that's true. I'd like to think it is.
Your demeanor is wonderful.
Well, thank you.
So is your cologne, by the way.
Oh, wonderful. I'm going to come here more often.
It smelled so good when you walked in the room. Yeah.
And one thing it takes is consistency. You have to say what you are going to do and then follow through what you're going to do. You have to listen most of the point. It's amazing in our society we don't nearly listen as much as we should. And a lot of times that's all it takes is for someone to feel heard, someone to feel like that the things that are deepest and darkest to them they can say in a safe way. And I think that's the biggest piece. And that gains trust more than anything. I'm assuming that Robin Williams had therapy. He was certainly in treatment quite a bit, but I don't know that to be true.
Right.
But I don't know what he held on to, but it had to be something for him to get to a place dark enough that suicide was an option, which it is for a lot of people. About 30,000 people a year commit suicide in the United States.
Do you know, I've got so many things I want to tell you, Tom. Let me tell you this first, because this was earlier. You said something I wanted to tell you. Robin McLean, and I have done music for different groups, and among those groups is children. And when we were playing mostly for children, we played a facility where the students were pretty much from the rich. Mm-hmm. They were rich kids. And we played, not too long after that, a facility in town called Hillcrest, where they have children who are handicapped, in some cases physically, some cases mentally, etc. The physically handicapped children were the happier of the two groups. I mean, by far.
Yeah.
By far. We had a hard time getting the rich kids to even laugh. And then at the end, they just wanted the physical possessions that we had. They wanted Robin's jingle bells, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, they wanted to take them.
So I don't know. Sometimes, I don't know how that contributes to this conversation, but I wanted to tell you that.
Well, I think it certainly plays into the idea that having success, celebrity, and money doesn't necessarily make life easier. I think it raises our expectations, too. My guess is that the kids who live the simpler life can enjoy the simpler things. And we don't think that way in our society. Our society is about, moving forward, gaining success. But I know an awful lot of successful people who aren't happy.
But I have a hunch about this, and that's kind of what I wanted to ask you about. My hunch is that the child who needs more help gets more help. And that help simply does one thing. It puts somebody else in their life, whether it's to put their shoes on, to button their shirt, to push their wheelchair. The rich kid who isn't handicapped, I'm not just saying it's a rich kid, but is left on his own. He'll watch the TV, play the video game, And I think it hits on what you were saying earlier about just be with somebody.
I think it's absolutely true. Our society has become more avoidant. It's easier to connect to technology. It's I mean, how many times are you sitting at a table and 4 or 5 people are there and they're all on their phones texting somebody else or looking something up on the internet, and the kid's always watching TV or playing a game. Kids don't go outside and play. There's absolutely something. There's a theory of psychology called attachment. It's one of my favorite pieces of work that talks about that connection and how important it is to get that eye to eye, how important it is to get touch. I saw a study the other day that a kid needs to be touched 12 times a day. And I don't know that happens. And loving touch, not just touch.
Right.
And it's accepted in our society. It's where we're becoming, and technology plays a huge part of that. And
well, I often think that's why we have parties. And that sounds kind of silly, but it's almost like, because I avoid parties. I don't want to be in a party, But yet, when I go, I'm always glad I went. And it's not because there's food or drink or anything like that. It's just like, wow, who I met there? I saw Tom. We talked for a half hour. It was so great. And you know what? In our line of work, we speak to people about whatever it is they've come to speak about. We don't get to speak about them. We could spend a whole day with you learning about you.
Oh, I'd take more than a day.
But we're taking this time to talk about your expertise. And that's kind of... Well, that's what we should do in this time frame, but you know what I mean.
Absolutely. And I think that what you said about the hesitancy to go to the party and then the reaction afterwards is pertinent to this conversation too, because isolation plays a huge part in suicide, and that feeling of not being able to do something, not being able to interact with other people. And the truth is, when we can push ourselves out of it, when we can get that human interaction, it makes a dent in that depression a lot of the time. So I think that's very pertinent to what we're talking about.
Since technology is like everywhere today, you can't turn on the computer without seeing the top news stories, or the television, listen to the radio, see the newspapers. Why is it then, since when people do commit suicide, it's all over the news everywhere, it's on your phones everywhere, and then you see the devastation that happens to the people that are left, but yet people continue to do suicide? Why is that when they see the results that it happens?
Well, the first thing is, I don't think we do see this on the news very often unless it's a major celebrity. I think if there's 30,000 suicides in the United States every year, how many do we actually hear about? We hear about the ones, and we hear about the ones that have something to do with, like, Heath Ledger or Philip Seymour Hoffman. We feel that are connected to drugs, and they're big. We don't hear about how many people die from drugs, alcohol, from suicide, from depression in our own community. And I can guarantee you, it's a larger number than you might believe. People who suffer in silence, and I don't think. In the moment of desperation, either, and that's the other thing. I hear people saying that Robin Williams was weak. Or they and again, anger is a very common reaction to it, and I can understand why. To get to the point where you could be selfish enough, because suicide is selfish, it's the ultimate act of selfishness, to be in enough pain to believe that things are not going to get better enough that you could make that selfish choice. What I have to do is I have to look at what must it be like to sit in that body. It's not an act of I'll show everybody. Very rarely is that the case. Most of the time, it's the case is, I don't believe this is going to get any better, ever. I can't suffer through this any longer. The same as if someone had a debilitating illness like cancer, or a debilitating illness like Lou Gehrig's disease or something, where we watch them, and that's much more understandable, isn't it? Yeah. If we see someone make that choice. It's still selfish, but I don't think depression is any less selfish. Or any less debilitating. It's a matter of fact, the World Health Organization back in 2010 said it was going to be the #1 disability. I got that off of a website, but it's very common illness in our society today. And in that moment, it feels like your only choice.
Can you, in the context of this, I know it's just a radio interview, but can you tell us what we can do and speak to two groups of people, the people who are perhaps thinking of suicide, and the people who love somebody who might be thinking of it?
Well, for those who are suffering, even in that deep depression, if anyone's listening now, seeking out help is the #1 thing. Depression is treatable. About 80% of the people with depression who get treated it does change. There are medications that do work. There are activities that do work. The number one thing I've seen work for people with depression is exercise, because it raises the serotonin levels. It raises the chemicals in the brain. This is a chemical issue for most people. It's not just I'm sad and life is horrible. There's a chemical issue that occurs in the brain that needs treatment. So even though it feels hopeless, know that it's not. Most people who have survived a suicide attempt are grateful that they survived it. Not all of them. Some are very angry that they did, but most of them are grateful that they survived it. And a lot of the times, what you need is to talk to somebody else. So if you seek out therapy, if you seek out medical treatment, a psychiatrist or a therapist, if you seek out medical help even, your local doctor can help you too. They're not always the best choice because they're not as educated, but they can make it in. And reach out and let your family know. And there is help available. That's the biggest message that I can give. And certainly we do that at the Refuge. We do that at our outpatient facility. And
well, right now you, Tom, are reaching out to somebody. And are you, can they contact you personally? Like if you're actually reaching somebody right now, can somebody call and ask for Tom?
They can certainly ask for me, and I'll certainly talk to who I can. My schedule's pretty full, so I'm not completely available. But if I can't, certainly someone else I will. But I'm open to that if someone needs help. And I work at both the outpatient facility 1 day a week, and I work at the inpatient facility the rest of the time. Now, to the family members, what I would say is don't give up hope. Don't look at your family member as weak if you can help it.
But do you even know? I mean, is the person obvious?
Well, not everybody is obvious. Some are going to suffer in silence. They're going to try not to impact the family. But I think if someone's in that deep enough pain, it'll show if you're looking for it. And we should be talking to each other anyway. We should be asking questions of our family.
Yes, we should be.
And we don't.
Have dinner, go fishing, go camping. Just something that requires no technology. Maybe a big lighter would help. But other than that, yeah.
Well, and the other thing is that even if they're not responsive to you, you can encourage them to get help. Sometimes there's not a whole lot you can do to change the situation. We're kind of powerless over our family members, but we can suggest, we can certainly ask, we can certainly talk to them, and that's the biggest thing.
You know what I wanted to ask you, Tom, and I don't know how often this happens, and maybe I'm just believing the movies or whatever, but somebody who is addicted to, let's say, alcohol or even some kind of a drug,
sure,
they decide they want to quit that. And then they become unhappy. And they say, I was a happier drunk than I am sober. And now they are contemplating suicide. They just don't like life without their substance.
Absolutely. Well, that's one of the things we have to be very careful with in treatment. That's why inpatient treatment can be very important, because there is a withdrawal period. There is a period. There are certain people who are suicidal and so depressed, and you give them antidepressants, and that gives them the strength to actually commit suicide, because they didn't have the wherewithal to do it before.
Really?
So inpatient treatment for someone who's in that position is incredibly important, and professional help. But yeah, a lot of times you're going to be struggling that first couple of months, that first year is sometimes difficult. And the perspective is skewed. No, your life is not worse. Your life is better. You're just actually dealing with your problems. And that's why therapy is important. That's why proper medication is important. And support. And that's why 12-step groups are incredibly important, because they give you a group of people who not only have been where you've been, but are there for you in whatever capacity they can be. And they're willing to listen. And they understand how to get to the other side of it. Now, that doesn't happen to everybody who gets off drugs and alcohol. Sometimes it's the happiest thing they can do.
Yeah, right.
But when there's long-term use, I mean, it's easier to be drunk or high and in misery in that way than it is to think about the actual problems. But it's like taking a little bit of poison. It might not kill you at first, but eventually it's going to kill you. And that's the truth of addiction. But I've seen, I'm 21 years clean and sober myself. I've walked this path, and I have seen people who move from that place do incredible things. My mother being one of them, just one of them. Robin Williams himself, when he got sober, those are the best times of his career. Those are the times he was most successful. It's just getting through that dark period in the beginning.
And then how do you tell the person that wants help, but he really can't afford to take off work because he's got bills to pay, he's got animals to take care of, he's got children to support, but then he's got to take off work and that income isn't there anymore for him to get help?
Well, and you've got to look at the realities of your situation. If it's at all possible to do inpatient treatment, I mean, that's the best way to get that help. If you can't do that, then there's outpatient treatment is available where you will go 2 or 3 nights a week or during the day. And therapy you can do lots of different ways. It's a lot harder to get well that way. It's a lot harder to try and give up, especially if you have a drug abuse or alcohol issue, to give that up on your own. But it's not impossible. The other thing I would look at is the reality of, a lot of times I won't go to treatment because of this issue, that issue, or this issue, but how much worse am I making my home life? How much worse am I making my work life if I don't take that time? If I came up to you today and you were in the same situation and I said, okay, you've got cancer and you need to go to Moffitt and you need to go do this for 2 months, are you going to tell me I have to work? Mm-hmm. Well, this is not a different disease. It's
good point.
You have to look at it as a disease, and we don't. We look at it as a character defect or a weakness, and it's not. It is a disease. It is classified as a disease, and we have to treat it in the same way. And the same with trauma. And the thing about trauma is it's post-traumatic stress disorder. It is a disorder of stress. Stress disorders are the #1 killer in the United States. We're talking about heart attack, stroke. Well, PTSD is another one. And we look at people who suffer from PTSD and we think, oh, they're weak, they just can't do. And it's just absolutely not true. This is a disorder that affects your nervous system. It affects your mental health. And if we don't start looking at mental health issues in the same way we look at physical health issues, we're doing great damage to our society, and it's just not fair. That's why Congress passed the Parity Act, to say that it has to be treated by insurance the same way, because insurance doesn't treat it the same way.
I didn't know that. Okay. Wow. So and when was that passed?
That was passed with the bill after the Recovery Act that was put in with that.
Okay.
And I mean, if you think of it, insurance companies will give you 2 or 3 days of time to work with somebody who has a horrific alcohol or drug treatment history, who has a horrific trauma history, and they'll say, this is all you need. Now, would you say that to somebody who had cancer?
Yeah, right.
Right.
So we need to lobby that a little bit, don't we? Or a lot?
Well, it needs to be lobbied a great deal. Unfortunately, the lobby for the insurance companies is much stronger than the lobby for the mental health industry.
Can I ask you about the person who got into legal trouble because of his or her addiction?
Sure.
That person now has, in addition to the addiction, this legal thing. And if they've killed somebody, God forbid, then they're probably going to have to be rehabilitated and spend the rest of their life in prison, I would think.
Well, it depends on the issue, but I mean, I've had people in my own family who had issues with drunk driving, and someone in the same car as them was killed, and they had to go to prison for a certain period of time, and it was very difficult. But through that process, they found sobriety. Through that process, they worked on those issues, and it's a very sad thing when somebody else is impacted. But a lot of people end up in very simple legal issues, DUI. Well, I don't know how simple it is, but DUIs are probably one of the biggest things that bring people to treatment. Issues within the family, divorce brings people to treatment. So sometimes these horrible things are actually gifts because it gets them sober.
There was a story about a guy who was a John picked up on a prostitute sting, and that's what he said. He said, I can't stop it. I'm addicted to it.
Oh, yeah, sex addiction is it's one of my areas of specialty, but it's just as much.
So he's now got a legal issue because he was, looking to get off, and he paid $20 to somebody, and whatever, or whatever it cost.
Well, and here's where you see
that I would know.
Well, and here's the issue that some people think it's not an addiction, and some people think, but what I want you to watch is somebody with that level of compulsivity, that same John who gets picked up, has this hanging over his head, ends up doing it again a week later.
Yeah.
Now, why would you make that choice?
Right. Oh, yeah, I know.
It's the same as drug addiction and alcohol. All these horrible things happen in our lives, and it's like, why do they keep using? Why do they keep drinking? Why do they keep acting out on whatever behavior they're acting out on? Yeah. It's because the compulsivity and the level of dysfunction in the brain that happens, they can't help themselves without help. That's why inpatient treatment I will always say inpatient treatment is the greatest gift you can give to yourself if you have these issues.
And the best thing we can do as an information vehicle, being a radio station, is to tell people how to get more information, because whether we're speaking to an author for a half hour or you for a half hour, there's so much more. And in your case, we need to let the listener know how to get a hold of you, how to get a hold of the Refuge. And is there a website, a phone number you can tell us about?
Sure. The Refuge website is the Refuge-ahealingplace.com.
Okay.
And all the information is on that website. All the phone numbers are on that website. There's a 1-800 number there. The local number, for those of you who are local, is 352-288-3333. And our operators there can help you find any information you need. There's also our intensive outpatient program here in Ocala, which I do not have the number in front of me.
Well, you know what, Tom? We're out of time. But Tom Pecca, thank you so much. For the listeners, please don't let this go unchecked. Take care of it. Be with a loved one. Call us if you need those numbers repeated. Tom Pecca, thank you. Call the Refuge. Thank you, Tom. We'll be right back.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. Another 130 troops have arrived in Iraq to help rescue refugees trapped in a mountain. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel.
We continue to support the process now underway.